Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
A proposal to create a government-wide non-disclosure agreement for federal employees is raising new questions about transparency and accountability. The administration says it reinforces existing rules, but critics warn it could have a broader impact on how employees communicate and report concerns. That tension between policy and behavior is at the center of the debate. Joe Spielberger of the Project on Government Oversight joins me now to break down the possible outcomes. Joe, thanks for joining me. It's lovely to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Terry. It's great to be back here.
When you were last with us back in April or so, we were talking about a completely different policy, but you warned us then that policies don't have to change the law to change behavior, that the real impact can be just the chilling effect on federal employees. When you look at this new proposed government-wide non-disclosure agreement, are you seeing that same kind of maybe thought process playing out here?
Absolutely. So if this proposed NDA does go into effect, the likely impact we'll see is a widespread crackdown on whistleblowing and free speech rights. So to be clear, the NDA does adhere to the requirement that it states it doesn't conflict with or supersede whistleblower protections. That's language that's legally required for these sorts of NDAs. And at the same time, even if whistleblower protections will technically still exist on paper, this will have a direct chilling effect. So one thing that this proposal does, it's aimed directly at insider sources who have disclosed information that the media then reports on. OPM justifies this by citing examples from the raid on Venezuela to ICE activity to the Dobbs decision, and some of the most polarizing and controversial recent decisions and actions. So that makes this seem more designed to protect against potentially politically damaging information from getting out, rather than information we truly want to keep confidential, and to further shield the administration from more transparency and oversight.
But Joe, put this in context for us because, federal employees already operate under some restrictions in terms of what they can say and who they can say it to. Is this just reiterating those, or is this putting new constraints on them?
So you're right. It's certainly not unusual to restrict certain information from being disclosed without authorization. Obviously, we already have laws in place preventing the release of classified information and other information that we truly want to keep private. So things like medical records, taxpayer information, social security numbers, and other types of sensitive personal information. So on the one hand, the administration even is saying that this proposal doesn't create new substantive restrictions and is simply codifying what already exists under the law. So even if we take that at face value, that would seemingly make this unnecessary to begin with. However, this proposed NDA creates this expansive category of so-called confidential government information that they are defining to include all non-public and confidential information they say should not be disclosed. And so that risks sweeping up a large amount of ordinary government work, even if that could be evidence of abuse of power, violations of the law or the Constitution, or other types of wrongdoing. And so NDAs in and of themselves are not unprecedented, but what is unprecedented is this wide-scale blanket NDA across the federal government.
Are the provisions in this NDA sufficient to eliminate confusion on the part of federal employees in terms of what they can and can't say, or are they more likely to err on the side of caution and just go, forget it, I'm not going to talk about anything?
That's really what gets to the heart of this issue, where even if this final NDA, if it is enacted, includes that legally required language stating that it doesn't conflict with whistleblower protections, on its face, having this very vague, loosely defined, and expansive category will completely risk increasing confusion and fear among would-be whistleblowers, where they will not have any sense of what information they can and cannot disclose.
Joe Spielberger is the Senior Policy Counsel at the Project on Government Oversight. Joe, you've mentioned the whistleblower protection a couple times, so I want to come back to it and dig in a little bit more. As you say, the proposal explicitly says it does not override whistleblower protections. But how's that going to play out in real life? If a federal employee says, wow, I have seen something really bad here and I need to file a report, I need to let someone know, how are they going to navigate this space between whistleblower protections and the NDA?
So it is already exceedingly difficult to be navigating in this current political environment how people can safely blow the whistle through lawful whistleblower channels. And one of the biggest concerns is that this NDA is not being proposed in a vacuum. But one thing it does is it explicitly links this NDA to suitability and fitness determinations, which this administration is already changing to make it easier to fire people. So in practice, it's likely that refusing to sign to or adhere to this NDA may be grounds for termination, because separate to this NDA proposal, a related proposal would remove many suitability appeals from the Merit Systems Protection Board and into an internal OPM review process. So that would allow OPM to be able to say that employees aren't complying with this NDA and are therefore unsuited for federal government, and they could direct agencies to fire them with very little recourse to appeal.
Okay, I do want to be clear. This is still a proposed rule. It's not implemented. It's still open for comment. But you just said something that's quite disturbing. If this rule goes into practice as it's currently written, what option would a federal employee have if they really feel uncomfortable about signing this? Is it sign or get fired?
So if you're a federal employee, what I would advise is to speak to an attorney and or a union representation who can really explain what this means in terms of current rights that exist and can advise you accordingly. What I can say is that, we certainly hope that this proposal will not go into fruition. If it does, it is very likely to be litigated, and whether it survives in how it's currently written or how it might be changed will likely depend on whether the government can issue this very broad restriction against disclosing unclassified information, and to what extent that restricts or prohibits employees from providing information to Congress and lawfully blowing the whistle.
Joe, you watch this space very closely, I know. How does this fit into many of the other moves you've seen the administration make when it comes to managing federal personnel?
I think the bottom line is that this administration has worked over the past several months to really exert as much control over the day-to-day management and operations of the executive branch as possible. They've worked to instill loyalty requirements. They've worked to undermine people's rights and protections to prevent them from speaking out against abuse of power and corruption. And the bottom line in all of this is that, we understand the importance of a nonpartisan civil service and open and transparent and accountable government. We learn so much information about corruption and abuse of power, thanks in large part to whistleblowers. And at a time when people already have very low levels of trust in government, OPM seemingly is turning those principles of good governance upside down to essentially say that the problem of distrust comes from information getting out rather than the actions and decisions and misconduct being exposed. So I think regardless of political leanings, this is an issue that should concern anyone.
And do you think that this will ultimately change what information reaches the public?
Absolutely. Again, whistleblowers already take huge risks to themselves and their careers to speak out and to do the right thing. It is already exceedingly difficult to do so. And when agencies are working so hard to make it even more difficult for people to safely speak out and to really control the flow of information that will prevent necessary information from getting to Congress, getting to the media, getting to government watchdogs, and getting to the public so that we can have a better understanding of where corruption manifests and how it can most effectively be addressed. And again, I think the bottom line is that being able to speak out against corruption and abuse of power wherever it exists should be a concern that unites us all, because it's foundational to our democracy and our ability to self-govern.
Joe Spielberger is the Senior Policy Counsel at the Project on Government Oversight. Joe, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.